Well, hey, for those of you guys that don't know me, my name's Bridget Harris. I'm the youth pastor here at CLF. It's been, again, I say this every time, but seriously, it's been so much fun hanging out with your kids. So if you don't know me, I'd love to meet you after service or some other time because the kids that I've met are phenomenal and they're the best. So these past couple of weeks, these past couple of months, we've been working through the book of James over the summer. Pastor Jeff did a really phenomenal job wrapping up the book of James last week. So if you haven't seen it, I just want to encourage you to go back and listen to it and watch it because it was really good. If you missed the whole series, go back and watch that too because seriously, it was great. But today, I have the privilege of introducing our new series, which is called Off Brand. And so Off Brand is something that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about the 5 core values of our movement, of our church here at CLF. And so off-brand, I know you're kind of wondering, how does that kind of connect to our values? Do any of you guys, have you ever bought anything that's like off-brand or the generic version or like something and you're like, it just didn't work quite as well as like the on-brand one was supposed to? Like you're kind of cutting corners a little bit, like piece of technology, and it falls apart like the first day you bought it. Or like maybe you're a parent and you bought like that off-brand cereal and your kids are like, I don't want that. You need to give me the real Fruit Loops. Like these ones from Aldi, I don't want those. And so that's kind of what we're talking about with off-brand. I've definitely had those experiences in my life. So one of them I can remember very distinctly. My grandma makes these phenomenal cookies. And when I was growing up, I'd go to her house every weekend, and we'd make cookies together, and she had this recipe, and we'd taste test it after every ingredient that we added in, and like it was the best. And so one time, not that long ago, I wanted to make these cookies for myself because I don't get to see my grandma as much anymore. I live out of state, and she's not babysitting me because I'm an adult now. And so I wanted to make these cookies just for nostalgia. And so I started to make them, and I got to the recipe, and I was like, oh, shoot, I don't have this like specific butter that she used. And I know it's really silly, and I was like, yeah, like it's butter, like it's just fine, doesn't matter, I'm following everything else. And so I made the cookies, and I made it with the butter that I had, and it was like this off-brand generic version, and they turned out like completely different. And any of you guys that are bakers, or like you cook in the room, like you know even just the slightest change in an ingredient can completely change the outcome of everything. And so I made these cookies with an off-brand butter, and it turned out terribly. And so the reason that we're talking about this is because there are certain things in life that you shouldn't cut corners on. There are certain things that you shouldn't go off-brand on. And so for us, it's our core values. And so there are 5 core values here at CLF, so that we are all in, we are sent, we are one family, we are extravagantly generous, and we love life. So those are the things at CLF that we're like, we do not want to cut corners on this. We do not want to go off-brand on these things because if we change even one of these ingredients, we're going to be completely off course. So these are the 5 core values. We're like, we are putting our best foot forward. And so today I get to talk to you guys about what it means to go all in. And so all in means that we are passionate about Jesus. He's not just a part of our lives, but he is everything. And we respond to him with an untamed, spirit-led, all-in yes. And so I don't know about you guys, but when I hear the term all-in, I instantly think of like going all in with like poker, because you see people online and see people in movies, and you just see those extravagant, like they're pushing everything in, they're like, I'm all in. And maybe that's just me. So like I said, I grew up going to my grandparents a lot. And so my dad's side of the family, we made cookies, we played cards. My mom's side of the family, we played poker. And so I'd play Texas Hold'em with my grandpa, with my papa growing up all the time. And he taught me what all the chips meant. He taught me how to play. He taught me the importance of having a poker face. And so for any of you guys that have played poker, you kind of know the importance of that. Like bluffing is a big part of the game. You don't want people to know what you have because it's a betting game and gambling. But my papa was a really good player. And so whenever we played when I was little, he would take it easy on me. And so whenever he went all in, I knew that he meant it. So when he pushed all in, he was like, I have the cards to back this up. And so for me, when I think of going all in, it's like, you're going all in. You don't just say it. You have the actions to back it up. And so as Christians, I think we also are called to be all in. But being Christian just can't be something that we say. We can't just say, I'm a Christian, and then do nothing about it, and then live no differently, and then nothing changes. And so when we're talking about going all in as one of our key values, it means that we're going to have the actions to back that up, that we're going to live all in, that you're going to actually be able to tell that something is different with us. And so I know all in can be kind of risky because obviously when you go all in, it's saying, yep, this is a risk. It's scary to go all in. In poker, sure, but in life more especially, it is scary to go all in because you don't know what's going to happen on the other side. But going all in is saying, God, I'm not just going to give you this piece of my life, this one chip. God, I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you all the chips that I have to offer. It's all yours. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this morning is what it means to give it all, to go all in. I think the word whole or to go all in, I think that part is difficult because in reality, I think it can be really easy to give God some parts of our life, right? Like, I'll give you this thing, but I won't give you that. I'll give you everything but, or I'll give you this except. And I think we all kind of do that. So maybe for some of you, it's like, I'll give you my Sunday mornings, God, but I'm not going to give you my Friday nights. I'm going to give you my money, but I'm not going to give you my time, or vice versa. Maybe it's, God, I'm going to give you this friendship, but I won't give you this relationship. And so we kind of pick and choose of what we're willing to give to God and saying, God, you can have everything except I'm holding this one back because I still want to be in the game. I still want to be in control. But that's not how we're called to live. But I want you to know that you're not alone in that thinking. I've thought that way. I'm sure every single person in the room and watching online, you've all probably had that thought at one point or another, that you're not quite ready to go all in. There's something that you're holding back. And so there's a lot of stories in the Bible that actually talk about that as well. And I want to focus on one specifically. It's the story of the Israelites as they're leaving Exodus. And so if you don't know that story, I just want to encourage you to go back and read it on your own time. You can get all the context, all the details. It's a great story, but I don't have time to fit it all into this message this morning. So the Israelites had just been freed from Egypt as slaves, and they were headed towards the Promised Land. And so the Promised Land is something that God had promised Abraham several generations prior. And he's saying, I'm going to give you and your descendants this piece of land. It's going to be the land of milk and honey. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to be yours. And so after God freed the Israelites as slaves from Egypt, they began to make their way towards this Promised Land that they had been promised. And so what had happened, though, is they were making their way to the Promised Land. The journey kind of began to get difficult, and they slowly began to forget, actually not very slowly, it was very quickly, they quickly began to forget all the things that God had done and all the things that God had saved them from. And so at one point, they actually made it to the Promised Land. Like, they were on the brink of it. Like, they made it to the land, and so Moses was like, I'm going to send out these 12 spies, and we're going to check out this land and see if we can go into it. And so they sent out these 12 spies to go check it out. And in the book of Numbers, it actually says that the land was so rich, it was so good, that it took 8 men to carry this one cluster of grapes back. Like, that's insane. Like, so the land was everything that God had promised. But with that, the land was also inhabited by these really large and terrifying people. And the spies reported back saying, these are people that are full of giants. Like, these must be descendants of giants. I'm too scared. We can't possibly take that land. And so they were on the brink of the Promised Land, of everything that God was ready to give them. And then out of fear, they chose not to go forward. And they rejected God. They rejected his command to go into the Promised Land. And as a result, they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And God wasn't willing to let them go in because they rejected him. So a really good point for reflection, and as I was reading this story, it made me think, what are some areas of my life that God is just waiting for an all-in yes? He's already given the promise. The land was already there. Thank you for fixing my mic.
It's not you. You're doing great.
Thank you. Can we give a round of applause for Pastor Eric? Oh, this is so much better. This is great. Thanks. So good point for reflection. What is some things in your life that God maybe has already promised, but he's just waiting for your yes, for you to enter into it? Because with these people, they were right there. They were right there. But they just chose to say, God, I'm too scared. God, I don't I don't know if this is worth the risk of going all in. I'm gonna hold back. And so reading further in the story, when you begin the book of Joshua, a couple books later, the entire generation that had rejected God, except for Caleb and Joshua, so these were the two spies so out of the 12 spies, there's 2 spies that came back and said, no, I believe that we can do this. God has promised this land, so I believe that we can go in. I believe that we can take it. This is ours for the taking. And so only 2 out of the 12 came back and gave that report. So in the book of Joshua, we encounter these 2 spies again. Their names were Caleb and Joshua, and they were the ones who advocated to go into this land. So everybody besides these 2, that whole other generation, they had all gone and they had passed away. And so God was waiting for all the people that rejected him to kind of pass away. So then the people that were like all in yes, that he could give them that promise that was waiting for them. So then once again in the book of Joshua, they're faced with the same decision. Do we go all in? Do we say yes? Do we accept this promise that God has for us? Or do we wait right on the outside? And that's what happened when they came to the Jordan River. There was a huge river that was just the one thing that was in between them and the promised land. And so the Jordan River was 90 to 100 feet wide, and it was roughly 3 to 12 feet deep, just depending on where you were at. But with the Jordan River, during this time that they were about to be crossing, it was actually during the flood stage. So that means all the snow is melting from the mountains, and the rivers were beginning to flood. And you guys probably know around here that floods are dangerous. Like I was always told growing up, like, don't swim in the river, especially when it's flooding, because it can drag you down, and like, rivers are dangerous. They're kind of scary. And so you had this huge nation of people waiting at this river, and they were just waiting to decide, is it worth it to cross? Is it worth it to go all in? Is it worth the risk? Can I overcome my fear enough to do this? And so if you read a couple chapters into the book of Joshua, they did choose to cross over. In chapter 3, verse 15, it says that the moment that the feet of the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant touched the water, the flow of the water from the river was completely cut off. So the second that their feet hit the river, it completely dried up, and it allowed them to cross over. Like, that was a miracle. And they did, and their entire nation crossed through. But as a side note, when I was reading that, I just think that's interesting that sometimes maybe the hardest part of our yes is actually just saying yes. Like for them, they didn't actually have to cross through this treacherous river. They just had to say, yes, God, I'm willing to take the risk. Yes, God, I'm willing to go all in. Yes, God, I'm going to do what you ask even when it's scary and even when it's hard. And the second they said yes, God was faithful. He's like, okay, here you go. Go into the promised land that I have for you. And so, same thing. What are the areas of your life that God has promised that he's just waiting for you to say yes in, to go all in the areas that might be scary or challenging? You never know what's on the other side of that yes. I think this is a really great quote from Charles Spurgeon. He's a really good theologian. But he said that God doesn't need our strength. He has more than enough power of his own. He asks for our weakness because he has none of that himself. So he's not asking us to do all these challenging, difficult things on our own. He knows what he's asked us to do. And he's saying, I'm going to take care of all the hard parts. It might not be easy, but I'm going to take the brunt of it. He's like, I'm just asking you to say yes. I'm asking you to come in your weakness, and I'll fill in the gaps. You can't cross that river on your own, but if you say yes, I'll stop it for you. So he's just waiting for your all-in yes. He's waiting for you to do what he's asked. So the Israelites, they cross over. They enter into the promised land. Now again, that doesn't mean everything is suddenly easy or perfect. They made it over the river, but they still had to face the giants. They still had to face all the same obstacles that the 12 spies reported before. But the difference this time around between the previous generation and this generation is they said, God, I'm all in. I'm yours. I know the obstacles that I may face may be difficult. I know that it may be scary. I know that it may be challenging. But whatever you ask me to do, God, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be faithful. I'm not going to let the fear, the challenges hold me back. My whole life is yours. I want what you want. I give up control. It's yours, God. And so maybe some of you in the room, probably a lot of us in the room, we want to be all in, but there's something that's holding us back. There's one little chip that we're not quite ready to give up yet. And so for some of you, maybe that's fear. Like you're like the Israelites that came across the giants in the land, and you're like, I'm just afraid. I don't know if I can do that. For some of you, it's control. And you're like, God, I know what you have for me, but I think what I have for me is better. And you're like, I want to be in control of my life because going all in, it's just too risky. It's too scary. I don't trust you enough for that. Maybe for some of you, it's the challenge. You're like, I want to be all in, but I'm dealing with these sin patterns, and I'm dealing with these old habits, and I don't know how to let go of these. I don't know how to cross that river. God's saying, you don't have to get rid of all that. You don't have to be perfect. I'm going to help you cross that river. You just have to go all in. I'm going to take care of the giants. You just have to trust me. And so for all of us in this room, there may be something that it is that we're like, God, I want you, but I can't just quite give this up yet. There's another story along those lines, kind of talking about this, and you might have heard this story before, and some people say, some of the facts are maybe not 100% historically accurate, but either way, it's a really phenomenal story, and the truth behind it is still really good. It's about an emperor named Charlemagne, and Charlemagne was one of the most powerful European rulers of the Middle Ages. He was leading a people called the Franks to rule most of Europe. And so under his rule, many people got baptized into the church. It was actually basically a requirement of his soldiers. So if you were going to be a part of Emperor Charlemagne's army, which he was recruiting basically everybody to, he's like, you have to get baptized. And so they would go down to the lakes or to the rivers in hundreds of people and all get baptized simultaneously. There's one person that noted that when they would watch these baptisms, something unusual would happen. And as all the soldiers were about to be baptized, they would raise their sword in the air, and every part of them would get baptized except the sword. And so that was the one thing they're like, God, you can have everything, but not the sword. And the reason why is because they're saying, God, I want to be able to, if I'm a soldier, I need to be able to trust that I can do with the sword what I want to do with the sword. God, I'm going to give you everything except my fighting hand. Because if the emperor says to go and kill this person, I need to be able to do that. And that's kind of crazy, but like literally they specifically held back. They're like, God, every part of me is yours except this. And so I think we all have maybe a metaphorical sword that we're holding. I hope it's not a real sword. But I think we all have a sword that we're holding. Maybe for some of us it's our wallets, and we're like, God, I'm going to give you everything except my wallet. I know you're asking me to be generous, but finances are tight. I can't do that. Maybe for some of you, it's like you're holding back a friendship. You're holding really tight to a friendship, and you know it's not good for you, but you just can't seem to give it up. Even though God's saying, if you just give that to me, I have something better for you. Maybe for some of you, it's your material items, your car, your house, your boat, whatever it is. Like you're like, God, this is really important. Even if you ask me to give this up, I'm not going to do it. I think, side note, if you're trying to figure out what that thing is for you, a really good question to ask yourself is, what's something that scares me to give up? Or what am I afraid of not having anymore? Because that's a really good heart check of, maybe this is something that I'm holding a little bit too high. Maybe for some of you, it's a career. And God's saying, hey, I know this career is really great and they're paying you really well, but I want you to go do this instead. And you're like, God, I can't give up that career. I can't do that. I've worked my whole life to be here. The list is endless, and it goes on and on and on. Maybe for some of you, it's just the way you're taking care of your body. He's like, hey, I want you to be healthy. And the way that you're taking care of your body right now, that's not healthy. So many different areas that we try to control in our own lives, and each of us has something. I have something. We all probably have more than one thing if we're being really honest. And so maybe even for some of us, it's something deeper. And it's like, God, it's not these material items, but I can't give you this because I want to be in control. What it really comes down to, God, is that I trust me more than I trust you. And I trust what I can provide for myself more than what you can provide for myself. So I'm not going to give you my job because I don't believe that you can provide better. I'm not going to give you this relationship because I don't believe that you have something better for me. God, I trust me more than I trust you. But the thing is, when we put our faith in anything other than God, what we're actually doing is substituting God and making that thing, whatever it is, it becomes an idol. Because it's saying, God, I want this thing more than I want you. I want this thing more than I want your will for my life and what you have for my life. God, I'm willing to let go of you and the plan that you have for my life to hold this thing instead. And so that's why Jesus is so adamant about being all in, about surrendering everything to God, because he realizes when you hold on to those one things, not only are you saying, God, I want this over you, but you're rejecting the beautiful plan that God has for your life. Because the thing about God is he doesn't want us to give something up just to punish us and to make us feel bad, and he doesn't want us to experience all these. He's a good God. And so if he's asking us to give something up, it's because he has a better plan for our lives. And so Jesus knows not only are you making this thing an idol, but you're just preventing yourself from the promise that God has for you. Just like the Israelites who wouldn't cross over the Jordan, God, I'm not going to give you this. I won't give you this. But he's like, if you just say yes, if you just walk into the river, if you just enter into the promised land, everything's already there. What I've promised you is there. In Matthew 6:24 says, nobody can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You can't have two masters. You can't hold this thing and still saying, God, I'm choosing you above this when you're not. You're either all in or you're not. You know who has no problem going all in? It's vegans. Have you guys ever met a halfway vegan? Like, I don't think halfway vegans could possibly exist. One, because it's not logical, right? Like, you can't be a partial vegan. It's like you're all in or you're not. But the thing is about, like, with vegans, if you try to be a halfway vegan, say you're like, I'm going to be a vegan and I'm going to give up everything meat-related, animal-related, except, man, I can't give up honey. Like, that's really hard. I can't give up honey. You know what the other vegans do? They shame you. They shame you so bad. They're like, you are not all in as a vegan. You're not a real vegan. And so, you never have a friend that you've known for like years and then find out years down the road that they're a vegan. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, when you meet a vegan, you know in the first 5 seconds because they're like, hi, my name is vegan. And I have a couple of friends that have tried to be vegans, and it's just funny watching that happen. But one of the funniest things, somebody was making a joke about it, somebody told me, it says the hardest part of being vegan is that you have to wake up at 5 a.m. and milk the oats. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Vegans, I'm sorry. If you're watching online, if there's any vegans in the room, I do. I love you. I think it's awesome. I'm not advocating for anybody to be a vegan. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy because, man, the vegans, I know they really struggle with it. But for real, I think there is something to say about their wholehearted commitment. Like, they are all in. Like, they are all in. And I think that there's something that we can learn from that, even if we're laughing and teasing about it a little bit. I'm consistently challenged by people in the Bible who go all in, who aren't afraid to take that next step, who aren't afraid to say yes. I think Jesus, of all people, knows how difficult it is to say yes, how difficult it is to surrendering your fear, surrendering your control, surrendering your will for God's, giving up your desires for his desires. But I just think about these people in the Bible, like, what if Noah almost built the ark? What if David almost killed Goliath? What if Jesus almost went to the cross? And that one hits me really hard because there's a big difference there between Jesus almost going to the cross and Jesus going all in to the cross. Going all in means we surrender everything. And that's what Jesus demonstrated for us at the cross. He surrendered his will. He surrendered his control. He surrendered his desires. He surrendered his fear. Saying, God, I want what you want. And Jesus is asking us to do the same thing. I think it's difficult, though, because we aren't hardwired for surrender. None of us willingly want to go like, yep, I'm white flag. I surrender. I'm yours. It's just not really built into our nature, especially the Western culture, more so than others specifically, because in our culture, right, it's all about like our rights. It's about what we can do. We have freedom. I can do what I want. If it feels good, it must be good. If I don't like what you believe in, I'm going to vote you out of office. Like, we have a lot of freedom here, which is awesome. And so surrender, submitting, it doesn't come natural to us. But Jesus came to turn the world upside down. He surrendered everything when he went to the cross, and that was difficult for him too. So when we're talking about Jesus surrendering, I don't want you to think, even though he was fully man and fully God, it was still difficult for him, and he recognizes that. In Matthew 26:39, the night before he was going to be crucified, he said, he bowed with his face to the ground praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done and not mine." So ultimately what he's saying is that, God, if there's any other way, if you can take this suffering from me, if I don't have to die tomorrow, can you do that? Because I'm scared and I don't want to do this. It's going to be painful and I don't want to do this. But at the end of that, he's saying, God, if there's no other way, if this is the plan that you have for me, Lord, let it be your will and not mine. I'll do whatever you ask me to do. I trust you that your ways are not my ways, that your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. God, that whatever you ask me to do, I'm yours. Whatever the cost may be, I'm yours. And Jesus says that we are held to the same standard. In Matthew 16:24, it says, "If any of you want to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up the cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, then you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul?" So each day, we're to take up our own cross and to follow Jesus, to die to ourselves, to surrender our desires for God's, to surrender our wills to his. The thing about crucifixion, there's no partial crucifixion. You go all the way or you don't. You die to yourself fully or not at all. And so in 2 Corinthians 5:17, it says, "This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun." And so when we choose to follow Jesus, we do need to shed that old life away. We can't just say we follow Jesus and then live exactly the same that we did before. But the exciting thing about this is the new life that God has for us is so much better than our old life that we could have ever done on our own. And this isn't just for the super spiritual. It's not just for the pastors on stage to be all in. It's for every Christ follower. It's for every single person in this room. It's for every single person watching online. We're all called to go all into Jesus. We're all called to be willing to give up our own desires for what God has for us instead. In Romans 4:18, it says, "If we live, it's to honor the Lord. And if we die, it's to honor the Lord. So whether we live or we die, we belong to the Lord." Our whole lives begin to belong to him when we say, "God, I'm yours. Jesus, I'm your follower." And so that can be kind of scary. But whether we live or we die, we belong to the Lord. So saying, "God, do with my life whatever it is that you want. Whatever you ask me to let go of, I'm going to say yes. Whatever you're asking me to speak truth into, whatever you're asking me to tell someone, I'm going to do that. Whatever job you're asking me to take, I'm going to do that. Lord, whatever it is that you're asking me to do, I'm going to say yes, no matter the cost." And in Ephesians 3:20, it talks about how we can trust God because he can do more with our lives than we could ever possibly think of or imagine or pray for on our own. So it's saying, "God, even though I'm trusting you with everything, even though I'm giving you everything, I can do that because I know that whatever you're going to do is way better than what I can do. Whatever you're going to do with my life is way better than whatever I could possibly come up with to do on my own because it's your will, and your ways are higher than mine." But all of this, it goes back to trusting God, trusting the promise that he has given us. And Joshua had to trust God when he took Israel over the river. See, trust and faith go hand in hand. And so in the Bible, it's really easy to focus on the faith highlights, right? Like Noah had faith in God, so he built the ark. David had faith in God, so he was able to defeat Goliath. Joshua had faith in God, so he was able to cross the river. And it's really easy to look at these moments in the Bible of these huge moments of faith and these huge miracles. But the one thing that all of these stories in the Bible and so many others have in common is that faith, it wasn't developed overnight. It wasn't like Joshua for the very first time had to choose whether or not to trust God when he was at that Jordan River. He actually began to trust God 40 years prior from the Jordan River when he was a spy going into Israel saying, God, you promised this land, so I'm going to trust that we're going to get it one day. Joshua's faith took decades to develop and to build up. Daniel's faith in the Bible took decades to develop. Jesus' faith in the Bible was fully man, he was fully God, but he still took him decades before he went into ministry. Faith isn't just something that happens overnight. It's actually like an exercise or a muscle that needs to be exercised. And so, super simple analogy, right? Like, this is a 2-pound dumbbell. I can pick this up pretty easily, thankfully. That'd be really embarrassing if I couldn't. This is a 2-pound dumbbell. And I can, I don't want to say I'm strong or anything, but I can do a couple curls with this 2-pound dumbbell. But if you were to give me like a 200-pound bar, there's no chance that I could pick that up. Like, my muscles aren't strong enough for that. There may be some of you in here that can do that, which props to you. But I haven't put in the work to be able to lift a 200-pound bar with some weights on it. I've put in the work to lift a 2-pound dumbbell. And so faith kind of works the same way, that you have to put in the work to develop it. It's daily. It's a routine. You have to work at it every day. You have to go to the spiritual gym every day. And so you start with these 2-pound dumbbells, right, in the gym. Keep going, you keep going. You're like, yeah, I can handle that pretty confidently. And then you're able to move on to the 10-pound dumbbell. You're like, yeah, I can do this. This is good. You're able to keep moving up and up and up. Or maybe you're like, oh, okay, this one's a little heavy. I need to go back down. I can't do this one quite yet. And so when it comes to our faith, maybe you can't trust him with the big things yet because you haven't trusted him with the small things yet. Maybe you can't give up the really big things yet because you haven't given up small things yet. And so if you're trying to build your spiritual faith, you're trying to build that muscle, what I want to encourage you to do practically is to start small and to be consistent. So maybe God's asking you, to give up 10% of your finances, to giving, to offering to missions, whatever it is. You're like, God, I can't give you that 10% yet, but I can give you 1%. I can do that. God, I can't pray to you for an hour every day. That seems impossible to me. But when I wake up in the morning, I can tell you that I'm thankful for the day. God, I can't trust you with my future yet, but I can thank you for all the things that you've done in the past. And slowly but surely, as you begin to exercise that faith muscle, you'll begin to trust him with more and more and more and more. Because faith it's a muscle that needs to be exercised. And so Joshua, he had a really big faith step to take. He had a really big bar to lift. But he was able to do that because for 40 years prior, he was putting in the work every single day to build that muscle. So in the same way, intentionally, every single day, we have to work to build our faith muscle, to give him more and make it more about him and less of us. In John 3:30, it says, he must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. Each day, God, I'm going to give you slightly more of me. Each day, I'm going to give you just a little bit more. I'm going to trust you with a little bit more. I'm going to pray a little bit bolder prayers, a little bit scarier prayers. God, I'm going to begin to pray the prayers that I'm scared to pray because I don't want you to let me down. And each day, you just begin to build that trust with him, that relationship with him, and you begin to watch as he becomes faithful because he is faithful, and he will answer your prayers. Maybe, again, as we said before, not in the way that you want, not in the way that you think they need to be answered, but he's going to do whatever is best. And so saying, God, I'm going to give you all of me. And each day, I'm going to give you more and more until it's all of me. God, even though I may fail, I give you all of me. Even when I doubt, I give you all of me. Even when I don't trust the words that you're saying yet, even when I don't trust the promises yet, I'm going to obey anyways. God, I'm all in. I'm all in. And so that's what being all in means, is saying, God, I give it to you. I'm willing to go on this journey with you, this process with you daily. C.S. Lewis has another really great quote. It says, relying on God has to begin all over again every day as if nothing had yet been done. And I think that's really cool because on one side, it's like, oh man, this is a journey. It's going to take a little bit. But on the other hand, it's like, I didn't give God my all in yesterday. but today I can choose to do it. Today I can choose to do it. And I just want you to try it, just to see what happens when you go all in with God, when you give him everything, when you begin to trust him with the things that scare you, when you begin to say yes to the things that are difficult, when you begin to let go of the things that you've been holding on so tightly to for so long. Because, like we said, God can do far more than we can ask or think or imagine on our own. And so I want to take literally just 2 minutes. We're going to pop some questions up on the screen. But I want you to take 2 minutes just to reflect on these questions and ask yourself some of these things. God, what am I living all in with God? Am I living all in with you? Is there anything that I don't trust God with? Is there anything that I'm holding back? Is there anything that I'm scared to let go of? What are the idols that I've made in my life? God, what's more important to me than it is to you? What's more important than you in my life? What do I need to do daily to strengthen my faith muscle? Because the journey is going to look different for all of us. Some of you might already be able to lift that 200-pound bar. Some of you are like, I can't even do the 2-pound one. It's going to look different. So just take 2 minutes here. Music's going to be playing. Just pray. Just reflect. Talk to God. Ask him to reveal some things in you. I'm going to come back and close this out, but just take 2 minutes just to do this. I hope that you continue on in this moment later in this week. I know that's really just briefly, just a couple of minutes. And so I just wanted to kickstart it. But I really do hope that you take more time throughout this week to wrestle through these questions and what you're feeling. I know that may have been a little bit of a heavy moment, maybe a little bit of a defeating moment, because as you're going through it, you're like, oh, man, I'm holding on to a lot more than I thought I was. I'm not living as all in as I thought I was. And I don't want that to be a discouragement for you. Like I said, we're all in the same place together. We're all working on being all in together. But I want to give you guys just a little bit of hope. I want you to picture what it would look like if every single person in this room would actually begin to live all in. How we would begin to impact our schools and our workplaces, the changes that we would begin to make in our friends and our family. What the freedom that you would experience would begin to look like. You're saying, God, I'm choosing you over this thing. There's so much hope. There's so many good things that God wants to do in your life when you begin to go all in. And so don't be overwhelmed. Maybe you're like, I have listed 10 things I need to give him. Just start with one. Start small and be consistent. God's with you. He loves you. He doesn't care how many times you mess up. He just wants your heart. He just wants relationship with you. So keep working at it this week, and seriously begin to imagine, like, as you're praying about these things throughout the week, take some time to picture what your life would look like when you're like, God, I'm all in for you. Because it's going to be amazing. He can do far more than we can ask or think or imagine. So dear Lord, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for the opportunity to come and to learn about you. We thank you for your patience, your grace, and your mercy. God, I pray this week you'd begin to reveal things in our life that we're holding over you, things that are idols in our life, things that we need to let go of. I pray that you'd give us courage to let go of those things, God. I pray that you would help us to trust you. God, that you continue to build our faith muscles. God, I pray that you teach us how to give up control and how to just submit to you, how to surrender to you fully. Lord, I pray that you just be with us this week, and even as the enemy tries to discourage, you'd remind us of the truth and of the beautiful future that you have for us. God, help us to be all in, even when it's difficult, even when it's hard, even when it's scary. Lord, help us to surrender to you fully. In your name, amen. So go throughout this week, be encouraged, try to live all in with God, and just see what happens. We love you guys. Seriously, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Sunday.